Hi everyone, this is Kate Warnock coming to you live from the GuideWell Insights Lounge. For the next 2 days, we'll be live streaming interviews with attendees and speakers from the prestigious Oliver Wyman Health Innovation Summit, an event where health industry leaders convene to directly tackle what needs to be addressed to deliver better and more consumer-focused healthcare. Our very first interview is with Terry Stone. Terry, welcome.
Thank you, Kate.
Terry is the global partner of health and life science practice at Oliver Wyman. Terry, one of the 4 forces that are accelerating the shift to Health Market 2.0 is the empowered consumer. Let us know, what do you think we're going to see when the consumer can actually control their own care as well as their own medical data?
That's a good question, Kate. I think one of the biggest surprises we've seen in all of the transformation in healthcare is that we seem to be seeing a real acceleration in the empowered consumer and the kind of influence they're going to have on the legacy healthcare delivery part of the market. A couple years ago, we were talking a lot about how the shift from volume to value is going to transform the world, and it's gotten a little bit gummed up. And I think one of the things that we think is going to happen at Oliver Wyman is that the empowered consumer will really start pushing that. And there's a couple forces at play. One is actually around just consumers having choices and consumers exercising those choices and shopping with their feet and choosing to not go to one facility or one doctor and instead to have something done somewhere else. Another one is that consumers will start taking a much greater vested interest in the management of their own care and in the management and control of their own health information as they start having more and more responsibility for managing the costs and the outcomes and results of their own healthcare. We've really insulated customers, or consumers I should say, in the last 10 years. And what we're going to see in the next 5 to 7 is that as more and more consumers have choices, they will actually become more engaged and involved in deciding amongst the options they have. And in doing so, they will need more of their own information to make their own informed choices.
Right, right. Well, along with that empowered consumer is the consumer who's generating a lot more of their own medical data. So with the proliferation of wearables and that sort of thing, tell us, how do you think that's going to impact how physicians manage their patients, as well as what do you think we might see in the changing business systems for providers?
Sure. I actually think we often talk about 2 big things that we think are probably going to be most disruptive in the next 5 years. One is the likely rise of the virtual visit, which we have not seen take off at the scale you might have expected. I mean, you could drop down in China right now and put in the address of a restaurant and wind up there using just your iPhone. And why consumers don't have that same ability with doing the virtual visit on their phone is sort of one of the big questions. We think that'll be a big push. The other one will be just the unlocking of all this information. Once we can move to kind of passively streaming biometric information about your current health status, the information about your various health and wellness activities, what your body's telling you about your current health, suddenly we've unlocked the power of your clinical team to actually keep track of you all the time. Whereas today, even the sickest of patients spend less than 3 or 4% of their time in front of doctors and clinicians. Yet we expect those doctors and clinicians to try and manage their overall day-to-day health and daily living. And I think the biggest shift we'll see is that by unlocking this information, the consumer will be able to be monitored and understood, and we'll be able to have the doctors keeping track of them throughout their daily living. And that'll be a big shift. And then I think the other shift we may see is depending on how business models emerge to do this, because right now there's lots of different companies popping up with new ways to capture and gather data. There's going to need to be someone who organizes the market, and depending on how that market gets organized, will also influence whether we continue to see more provider consolidation or whether or not small practices will be able to stand on their own because others will provide the needed resources to integrate data and information on their behalf.
So I think that your response is a great lead into our next question. So how can governments and health services encourage the effective uptake of digital transformation into the health industry? Do you expect to see more regulation, and could that possibly stifle where we're going?
Yeah, the government's always kind of a big wild card in the game, I suppose. And I think there are a lot of people who believe that if the government could just sort of mandate or create edicts, somehow we'd be able to advance along the cause of healthcare data and information and interoperability. But I think what we've largely seen is government regulation can be a double-edged sword. I think what happens is the government can set the terms and set the standards and create incentives, like they did with trying to get HIT accelerated in the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. But one of the problems is that when government intervenes and they put lots of checkpoints and lots of reviews, what we often have happen is people tick the box, or what we do is we transform how we're delivering care in order to meet the metric or meet the standard, rather than to really transform what's happening. I think that's what a lot of people think could be going on as a challenge in education, for instance. We have teachers teaching to a test because we're measuring against metrics, rather than teachers transforming how do we teach to improve the effectiveness of our education system on the problem-solving skills of Americans, et cetera. And I think we'll see the same thing with the role of government. I do think rather than regulating on the use of data and information, one of the things the government can do is it has an incredible amount of power at mobilizing a large portion of the population and the consumers. As we said earlier, consumers vote with their feet. But if the government can move the 65 plus population in Medicare toward asking more or utilizing their data and information, demanding more of the providers that they visit, I think that's where we'll start to see a real transformation. So the degree to which the government can influence that huge block of patients, I think that's one of the biggest forces that we can see having a sustainable impact in healthcare.
Well, Terry, my final question for you really relates to another force that you're going to be addressing here at the Health Innovation Summit, and that's around precision medicine. How do you expect precision medicine will upend traditional care delivery?
Yeah, precision medicine will be really featured in this conference more so than it has in the past, and I think precision medicine is one of the sort of one of the further out there trends that we see impacting healthcare, but one that can have some of the most transformative impact on what we can all expect. I mean, the precision medicine is the thing that will start changing people's longevity to being people living to 150 years old. It's not just about the data or the empowered consumer. And I think what we see today is that if the industry could better harness information, we would do a number of things. One, we would actually improve the lives of patients. So there are plenty of examples of where, in fact, the healthcare system today, for complex or rare diseases, actually does more harm in the process of actually trying to diagnose, right? And in the course of doing so, not only do we occasionally do more harm in intervening in patients while not actually correctly diagnosing or understanding what's needed, we also spend lots of money. There are instances where we spend millions and millions of dollars while also impacting people's lives negatively and still not getting a good outcome. And I think what we're seeing now is if you look out there, the power of what genomics and precision medicine can do is enable us to much more precisely and quickly identify what's wrong and identify interventions that will be far more impactful. And one of the things that we're hopeful of is if you look out there, big pharma is a good indicator in this. About 50% of what's in the early stage pipeline of big pharma are actually drugs that require a biomarker to be impactful. And this dramatically increases the effectiveness of the therapeutics. And in fact, what we've seen is that a normal drug, only 11% of them make them through all 3 phases of clinical trial. With a biomarker indicated drug, 69% of the drugs actually make it through 3 phases of trial.
That's phenomenal.
Because they're just massively more impactful. Right. And the proof and results is far less refutable. And so what we hope for there is that not only will we be able to cure diseases that we don't have solutions for today, we'll do less harm to patients than we do today when we put average medicines out to address all aspects of the population, but also we will really start driving that greater value, lower cost, while improving quality, life expectancy, and patient outcomes.
Well, I'm really excited for all the responses that you suggested today. Really tease up all the interviews that we're going to be bringing to you again over the next 2 days as we touch on these major forces that are really driving Health Market 2.0. So Terry, thank you so much for joining us today. Good luck with the rest of the event. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Kate.